I'm going to record this meeting of me by myself doing Lang team triage. It's going to be awesome. Maybe someone else will show up. I don't know. Until then, you can like watch me click. And maybe I'll narrate. It's going to be good. Let's start by sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, did I do any of these things? Oh, some of them are crossed out. Okay. I don't think so. Let's go take a look at some of this stuff. Oh my god, my computer is being really slow. This idea may not work out. Okay, what am I gonna do? Why, computer, are you like this? Let's see if disabling the video helps. Make this computer not so horrible. Okay. First of all, any new stuff here? We got review, save, transmute. Oh, that's a meeting proposal. That's already been scheduled. All right. So let's take a look here. I'm supposed to be doing this. I did that. I'm supposed to be reviewing active items, major change proposals, meetings. Okay. So, hello, other person. I haven't seen who you are yet. Oh, it's Josh. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Nico.
I thought this might just be me this week, so I was just narrating to myself. We're already recording. But I haven't actually gotten very far. So one thing is I did do some meeting scheduling that you can see here on these issues. And I think this week is Const Evaluation Skill Tree is our planned meeting.
Yeah, it sounds right.
So, and there's no new stuff here that I see. So, in terms of active projects, do we have any updates to this instruction set? It looks like well, we could discuss this briefly, but we're in final comment period here. The main question is, in my mind, is once this is merged, I mean, in the old model, we would create a tracking issue, and we would just sort of go off our radar at that point.
Right.
I've been wanting us to move to a model that involves a little more follow-through. But I also see for smaller issues like this, there might be some appeal to being able to say, okay, we let this, the Lang team itself doesn't necessarily need to be too involved in tracking this, though I think if it's not us, then I don't know who it would be.
I do think it makes perfect sense to do this as a project group and to get people actively interested in working on this. The net result would be very similar to the approach when we do a tracking issue and let somebody handle it, except that we're more actively saying, and when you have something, we'll be prepared to review it, and here's the person on the language team you can talk to, as well as like leaving open the possibility that instruction set may in the future require some additional design work as it goes. For example, during the course of implementation, something related to inlining may come up where they figure out the right way to do that.
Yeah, so I think that's I agree with that. I don't know that, I have two thoughts. I guess I think the right place to start is that we should have a group. And yeah, maybe that group is mostly, one person doing the implementation work. But I'm wondering about when it gets to the stage, let's presume it does relatively quickly, where it's ready to be, like it's been implemented and we just need to sort of wait until we're ready to stabilize it at some point. Um, I don't know if that. I guess this comes back to the staging question, but it might be nice if we recognize that by putting it in a bucket of like current state is sort of implemented and awaiting experience. Uh, Probably we shouldn't talk too much about this now, but I'm just remembering that now that we're nearly there to having the first few stages of our stage process, I'm remembering some of the ideas we had in the past about how to like manage the later stages and sort of explicitly requesting feedback on features or or other means to kind of help ensure things keep moving along. But let's get to that point first, and then we'll worry about it. I guess we could bring it up for inline assembly, but so any updates on any of these other items? Creating a lint. I don't think there's been any updates here, except that I did send some messages out to some possible people around doing the implementation work there. I haven't really heard back yet. Coherence, I haven't done anything on this issue. So project safe transmute, we have a scheduled meeting. Any other updates, probably?
In addition to the scheduled meeting, there is a write-up being updated, I believe, that will be available in advance of that meeting.
Okay. All right, already in the meeting. Hello. Already in the meeting sort of invite, there was, some fairly good coverage here. So, inline assembly, any updates?
A couple of updates, yes. So the change to allow multiple logical lines of inline assembly has been merged into Nightly now. And the blog post example has been updated so that people who use that as a reference will have that available. So this means that people will be able to write code that Rust format can properly indent and not have to worry about inserting or removing white space inside of a quoted string, which would be dangerous. So should provide substantial formatting improvements over either the old inline assembly style or what people typically do for C inline assembly. So that has gone in. The change has been made to the RFC and to the blog post. And at this point, I think that the next step is to finish checking off on the RFC.
Okay.
Which I would actually like to ask that question of, are there any blocking issues that anyone is aware of that would prevent us from signing off on the current state of the RFC? Or is there any reason we don't want to do that yet?
I'm not aware of anything, but there's only so many people in this meeting right now.
Sure. Yeah, it's not like we have a large Lang team quorum right now, but Felix, you're on the call. Do you have any reservations about the current state of the inline assembly RFC?
No, I don't have any reservations about
it. Anything stopping you from checking off on it?
Is that an implicit statement that I haven't checked off on something I'm supposed to check off on? I don't have anything stopping me from checking off.
Okay. Not like if you need more time to read it or process it or things like that. This is not pressure. This is like, do you have any questions that we should try to address?
Yeah, no questions.
Okay.
I have a question. What is it called? The Unstable Rust book? Have we documented it in here?
Yes.
Okay, good. Where is it? I can't find it. Inline assembly. And did we update that documentation with the latest
I did, yeah.
All right, awesome. I'm gonna take your word for it. Great. FFI unwind. There is a few minor updates here. We've got, first of all, okay, let's see. First of all, we opened an RFC, if I recall. This probably should be close. Let's see if I can find the URL. What is all this stuff? Oh, this is issues. Okay. Right. And so there was an interesting question that arose. We've talked a lot about this C versus C unwind ABIs. However, Petroshenkov raised the point that we use the current unwind allowed attributes on things that are not in those ABIs, most notably system, and we'd have to come up with some. We have to sort of support that use case too if we're going to remove the attributes. Which, let me find an example function of this that was actually used. So
well, it looks like Petrochenkov today is suggesting that we may just want to retire the alias system for internal use and have like standard call and this call variants of unwind.
yeah, I don't know. Right. So I don't know. I mean, system is one thing, but we could either, we can add system unwind / stand call unwind or whatever. We can add unwind variants to any ABIs that we want, and maybe we don't need system anymore.
Right.
I don't remember that much about system. I sort of vaguely remember adding it, but not why or what it does. But I'd have to review where it gets used.
For my part, at least, I would say I would rather not have some ABIs default to unwind and some ABIs default to no unwind. If we're going to say that C defaults to no unwind and we have a C unwind ABI, then I think we should have a standard call unwind and a this call unwind and maybe even a system unwind. If we want to have unwind allowed by default, then we could have a C no unwind and optionally a standard call no unwind and so on.
Right. I think it would be, I think what you're saying is you wouldn't want to have system, let's say, implicitly permit unwinding.
Not unless
or implicitly is a loaded term sometimes, but right. Without any explicit
be consistent, yeah.
However, you could imagine just not having system at all and only having system unwind, for example.
Well, strictly speaking, system is an externally supported ABI, I believe. I don't think it's unstable. So we can't just make it not exist anymore. And now it's questionable whether its current unwind behavior is defined or undefined, but that's a different problem.
Yeah, okay. I think I agree with this point in any case.
So yeah, I think we should add a system unwind and use it throughout the standard library.
Right. I basically think it's fine. If we're going to add it to C unwind, I don't see why we wouldn't add it to other ABIs as well. The only question would be if we want, some people were floating some older syntax like this, I guess, that as an alternative. But
which older syntax?
Some kind of keyword.
Oh, I see. Having it be a pseudo keyword?
Yeah.
Okay.
I personally don't see the advantage in that, but yeah.
I can see how it would help, but you still have to have individual support on an ABI by ABI basis for what unwind means in that ABI.
Right.
So one thought, though, we did have an unstable concept of unwind allowed, and we never stabilized it, but we did have an attribute for it, and it's used in the standard library and potentially in other code that is currently unstable. Could we add a lint that detects if you have a some ABI that doesn't allow unwind with a function tagged as unwind allowed and say, hey, if you actually expect unwinds here, you need to use the such and such unwind ABI. That's even something that could have a fix. Like you could Rust fix away the unwind allowed attribute and Rust fix add the system to system unwind or C to C unwind. That would be a helpful lint for migration.
Yeah. That warns if the ABI does not permit unwinding. Right. I think we could have a lint. I would expect we would. Yeah. I would expect we would be moving to remove this attribute because it's not stable as far as I know.
I expect we're going to do the same thing, but many of the people today who were using this attribute, like people who are in the target audience for C unwind or similar, were also people who potentially adopted this in unstable code or nightly code rather. So
yeah, so I think we'd give a lint. We'd say you should be using the C unwind ABI now, or whatever, and we should but it should still work, right? Like we should convert to the C unwind ABI and warn that we're doing so and that this attribute is going to be removed, and that they should explicitly adopt the C unwind API in order to be on the stable path. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think I agree with that. I want to close this. I want to be done with this. I'm not inclined to revisit any larger discussions myself. I think we've had enough time to do something. Like in terms of this keyword and so on. Does anyone disagree with that in this meeting? I'll put it like that. All right. Very good. I think what I'm going to do is post this comment when you decide. I like these comments as a way to collect notes, but I think for our own thoughts, I'll keep them in the minutes document. So, const evaluation. Oh, I think I saw Dylan. You were joining the meeting, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Any thoughts or updates?
No, I think we have the design meeting this week, though, so we'll talk a bit more about what's going on there.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Let's put a link to that while I'm at it. Okay. So that settles that. Jumping back to the agenda, let's close. P-high issues. Our old friends. Any thoughts anyone wants to share on any of these issues? I don't see any updates that I'm aware of. I think arguably this issue I would like to propose is not p-high. Like coerced unsized is unstable. We should put this as a blocker on stabilizing coerced unsized, but until then I don't think it's something we need to urgently resolve. Anyone disagree with that statement? If so, maybe you should work to urgently resolve it, because I don't know where else it's going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll take it as an action item to do. The other ones, I think we should be... I would like to get to the point where things are not p-high unless we're really working on them. And right now, we're pretty clearly not really working that actively on these things. But we'll come back to that question. Nominated PRs. This one has this is our old friend. We've recorded a meeting request, but it's not currently scheduled. Nominated issues. Yes. Okay. So next order of business, that's what it's supposed to be saying. Issue 72012. Let me put this here and explain. There was a soundness problem uncovered with the target feature the new target feature 1.1 design. So the old target feature made every function that used a target feature specification unsafe. But in the new version, you can declare the function as safe, and it's just unsafe. Call it from a context in which you don't have the same target feature set. Nice. But we overlooked something, which is that these functions, at least today, implement the FN traits. So that means code like this. Here you get back function pointer. The target feature sort of set is overlooked. Well, actually what you get back is the function def type, which then, like the unique type for the function, and then since it implements FN once, you can call it here. There was some discussion about how to fix this, and there's a pending PR. So Petroshenkov had a proposal which said that you should always have to write unsafe function, but we should modify the unsafety checker so that if you're calling this function from a context where the right target features are in scope, then you don't have to write unsafe, if that makes sense. I don't think that's a good solution for the reason I gave here, which is that it might be unsafe for more reasons than just the target feature set, and you can't express that.
Right. If you actually write it as unsafe, then it should require unsafe. The only time it shouldn't need unsafe is if target feature is the only thing that would make it unsafe.
Right. And so another option would have been to make it so that it would be unsafe just to reference this function. So this line would be unsafe because we don't have the right target feature set. However, that would be kind of inconsistent because already today on stable you can do this, where you declare the function as unsafe and you reference it, but you never call it. This function's dead code.
You can do that on stable?
Yes, sir. Here's stable. I was surprised too.
Well, what type is X here?
X is the unique function type associated with use AVX. What you can't do is this, which would coerce it to a function pointer. At least I hope you can't do this. Yeah.
Can you do let X colon impl fun?
You can't do impl fun in stable. But what you also can't do is this, which is probably what you meant. You can't do this. This is relevant to the final solution that was proposed.
That's what I wanted to know, yes.
You can't do this because no unsafe function implements FN once. Whether or not it has target feature.
Okay, that's good.
So, right. Wait, where did I have? I guess it was in this tab.
So how do you, if that's the case, then how is it you can
Well,
So to
My-
target feature 1.1 breaks this?
No, target, well, it doesn't break it, but the thing with target feature 1.1 is you don't have the keyword unsafe.
Ah,
And so now, because now there is a hole here because we would accept it.
I see. But target feature 1.1 is nightly only, so if we change this behavior, it will not be breaking any stability guarantees.
Exactly. Unstable, we don't accept this.
Okay. So
So
then the fast fix to this would be to just make sure that target feature functions cannot be used in fun. The ideal fix, in my opinion, would be to say that you can actually put a target feature function into a fun, but you can only do so either in an unsafe block or from inside a function that currently implements the target feature. Uses the target feature, rather. So, like, if you're in a function where target feature 1.1 is saying this is using AVX, then you'd be allowed to put that AVX function that also uses that same feature into a fun or a fun once or a fun trait of any kind.
So let's say that again. So you could say it is unsafe for functions that declare target feature to implement fn and friends. Is that what you're saying?
Effectively, at the point where you would turn them into an implementation of fun, like use their implementation of fun, then you have to either be in an unsafe block or you must be in a function that would also be permitted to call that function without an unsafe block, meaning one that uses the same target feature.
So the latter half isn't sound because it can easily escape from your...
But it doesn't. It's still sound as long as we assume that if you have successfully run code that uses that target feature, that your processor has that target feature, and therefore you're allowed to do it again in the future.
I see.
So it's sound as long as it is not our intention for target feature to work on, say, a system that magically supports different features on different threads or processors, which is theoretically possible, but Rust would need a lot of fixes to work on that kind of system, I think.
Wait, aren't we already talking about certain? Well, this might not be quite the same thing, but we are talking about certain things to allow different processor modes, right? To switch, like different processors, like the thumb or whatever.
That was instruction set.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yes, I mean it's sort of similar.
That one isn't the target feature. If your processor supports a given instruction set, it supports that instruction set. Like, it won't be the case that if you support
switching to a different instruction set.
Call it.
Switching to a different instruction set won't change the feature set available, is what you're saying, right?
Right, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me just interrupt for a second. This first one about it being unsafe, that's not something that Rust has today. We have a notion of unsafe impls, but they're unsafe to write, not unsafe to rely on. So
this would absolutely require some extra work in the trait system, and that's why I said it's my ideal solution, but that the fast fix for this that has to be that has to happen before we stabilize this would be you just can't use FN traits with the with functions that use target feature.
Right.
But yeah, we could do this in the type system, I think. It just would require a substantial amount of work. Yes.
The second point is interesting. I hadn't considered the fact that that it could plausibly escape, and that's okay. If, like, just to be clear about how I would imagine, this might be something like this.
Nico, the idea that you put forth earlier about having it be unsafe to reference a target feature function rather than merely call it, you wrote an example down about why that would be somewhat inconsistent given, you gave an example of something that already compiles today, but the example you gave of something that already compiles today doesn't seem like a really great motivation, right? It doesn't seem like something I look at, I'm like, oh, of course that has to work. I would be just as happy like making that future compatible, right? And like sort of putting on a track towards saying we're not going to allow this in the future.
Yeah, that's exactly what the fast fix is don't
Is that
allow.
the same thing as the fast fix?
No.
I don't know if it's the same thing.
There's two different proposals. So
Okay.
the fast fix, I should add, just to cut to the chase, is actually implemented in a PR here.
Okay.
Which says, I mean, basically what it is not all FNs that you can write implement the FN traits. That's already true. Unsafe functions don't. Ones with different ABIs don't. And now we include in that list also target features. But that's a little bit different than the proposal that I was saying about unsafe to make a function pointer. Yeah, and so I guess, or unsafe to make to reference without calling. And so Felix, you were saying plausibly we could make a quote unquote soundness fix so that this example here, which uses the unsafe keyword, we could make this example also an error. And we could, but it seems, in my opinion, a more intrusive fix than the quote-unquote fast fix, because the fast fix, like I said, there's already like a variety of conditions in which a function. This seems very analogous to me to like changing the ABI, even though it's different. But there are already conditions in which functions do not implement the FN traits. They have to be like a vanilla function in order to do so, and whereas it would be sort of unnatural in the compiler to say you can have an expression use AVX, but it has to be called like only if it's within a call. I can't refactor code that was previously doing this. I can't refactor it to this. Sorry, to this. You know what I mean? That feels like a hard thing for us to implement. It's just not the way the compiler is set up.
Sure.
So I would sort of lean against that proposal unless we had to do it.
Okay. One other thought, by the way, the more ideal proposal that I was suggesting, I'm not suggesting that I don't know how trivial this would be, but imagine for a moment, instead of actually like just having the function type implement those fin traits, and therefore you can pass it anywhere you could pass that fin. Imagine if you just had a function that was unsafe that returned that trait, as in you return an object that does implement that trait, then you could call that function in an unsafe code or in something that implemented the target feature. Let me write that out. What if you had a you could theoretically have a function like that where the signature of asfin is effectively
I guess. I'm not sure what you're proposing exactly.
1 second. So the premise would be that the asfin function is something you could call that will return the function you call it on as an implementer of the fin traits, and that function could itself use target feature 1.1, which means that you can only call it either in an unsafe block or code that is using that feature. So the difference between this and the ideal solution is that we wouldn't want to have to call .asFun, but this would be a thing that I know we can implement today.
I'm a little confused whether you're proposing something like a pattern that people could use today if they wanted to, or something where the compiler would auto-generate these methods.
Kind of the latter. The idea would be that a target feature 11 function could implement this trait that provides a target feature asFun trait function. I'm not saying we would actually do this in stable. I'm saying this is a pattern that suggests how we could implement the ideal case and then just treat it that way inside the compiler. Did that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I guess I would say yes. In other words, yes, I think that's true. I think it's a change that would require, like, it feels a little out of scope for like a triage meeting. It feels like a more of a RFC worthy topic, but in terms of the ideal, I guess in terms of both these ideal features, certainly this latter one, that doesn't seem totally implausible to me. It's the kind of thing where both of these, I mean, I can imagine how we would implement them, but I would just want to think over especially the unsafe case. I don't know, that seems like, okay, the idea of having unsafe impls or conditional impls that require these sort of basically conditional impls with where clauses that are more like the environment they're being used from than anything else, like, and that's an interesting idea, but I would rather explore it on its own.
Sure. This probably if we had a target feature 11 project group, this would be something to kick over to the project group and say, can you do this?
Yeah, in my mind, it would be something to rule out of scope for the project group and leave on the design table for later. Like, it doesn't seem all that, it seems like a pretty edge case in my view, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Especially given that you can sidestep it with a closure already. So, like
how so?
Let's see.
I see.
So,
And then if the compiler were smart enough, it could just say that the closure doesn't need to exist and can just be the function, also use AVX.
yeah, it could. As it is, the compiler is going to, so wait, why did this, actually I'm a little surprised. That's interesting. I take back what I said. I'm not sure if this is actually the expected behavior. I guess that we're checking, we're not inheriting this target feature in the closures. That might be a separate bug. That's debatable. I think that relying on your reasoning of, you can't have created the closure unless you started invoking the parent.
Right.
By then you're already requiring. I would rather fix it this way. What would happen when you compile this is you would get a, I think you would make a small shim, right? All that shim is going to do is immediately call this other function.
But if the closure type inherits the target feature, then that would suggest that...
No, the target feature is not part of the type, step one. The rule, we'd have to change the rule that says closures are allowed to use the target features of their enclosing item. That would be what we want to say.
That's actually one question that's worth asking here is, should it be part of the type? We've talked before about the idea that, say, extern C versus extern standard call should be part of a function's type, and the idea that target feature could be part of a function's type seems related.
I mean, you could imagine it being part of the ABI or something. I don't know.
I don't know either.
It's not part of the type today, so it kind of can't be without some challenges. But like there's stable code that coerces many things to unsafe functions that I guess I don't think it, I don't know, but maybe there's a model where it makes sense. But if we're saying that target features are more like determine the set of things available to you and not something you'd want to track on a fine-grained basis, is what I'm saying making any sense? Maybe not. I don't know. I guess you could imagine having, here's a bunch of function pointers that I know should only be called when I've dynamically tested and determined that this function's available, but I wouldn't change it because it seems pretty niche, quite frankly, and it already exists and it's okay. I'm more interested in this question. Should closures be allowed to use the target feature of their enclosing item?
And I do think the answer should be yes.
Yeah. So, all right. I will write up a comment about this, but I guess my proposal would be that we accept this PR to close the soundness hole, but we also fix the relationship with closures, which is probably just a bug. And that once we fix those two things, now you can work around this problem if you consider it a real problem, using closures. I don't think it'll happen that often in practice. And if we did find it was happening often in practice, then we have room to grow the set of, try one of these two approaches. Does that sound reasonable? I guess I'll write it out. Nico's proposal, accept the PR that says functions with target feature declared do not implement the offend trace. Address the question of closures and what target features they have available, which also provides a workaround for the above case. If in the future we wish to do so, we can modify the conditions under which functions the target feature may implement the FN trades backwards compatibly.
This seems reasonable to me. The third point would be where the alternative that I'd suggested earlier could come in, but in the meantime, yes, closures would provide a good enough workaround.
Yep. Okay. Alrighty. That took a while, but it was useful.
The idea of defining closures that implement different target features also seems useful for being able to fill in function pointers in a table so that you can then call all of them from all stable code.
Yeah, so we could, that's a separate question, I guess. Like, could we allow you to annotate closures with target features? I don't think we do right now, but
good point.
I think
it would
we
be
could.
Nice.
Right. There is a sort of subtle distinction then between this example where the closure doesn't have a target feature because to construct the closure, you already provided evidence, kind of, that the target feature was supported, if that makes sense, versus
Right.
this kind of example, which would not compile, presumably. But okay, what am I looking at? Oh, any newly created RFCs, I see. It doesn't look like it. Okay, good. I'm gonna move that up here, because that's the kind of thing I like to do in the beginning. Nominated RFCs. The only one is the unwind ABI. I think we already... Did I nominate this? I did. Okay. I think we already discussed everything relevant. Speaking of pending things, yeah, so Felix, inline assembly, there you go. I don't know, we should probably ping Taylor, like, he already expressed support to me informally, so at least...
I did ping Taylor and didn't get a response back, but I may not have pinged via the right medium.
Yeah, email might be best. All right. Anything else worth noting here? What's going on with this tuple indexing, y'all? I got two members of this set here. You have strong opinions about this? Kind of been waiting for a while. Do you all remember this?
I remember the problem, and I think part of the concern was understanding like which of the half dozen different proposals that seemed to be being discussed is the one that's being proposed for stabilization, and I just hadn't dug through to try to understand that yet.
Yep. It is kind of confusing. There is a report here that tries to explain it.
Okay.
I took some, I guess it was adjusted. The initial version of the report I found a little misleading in my opinion, but the short version is the Lexer doesn't change, but we have new kinds of tokens that represent the pieces of a floating point number, and the parser, when it gets, the parser will kind of break down. If it gets a floating point token, it'll break it down into smaller tokens, which is sort of internal to how the parser works. So that means that side effect of this is that procedural macros that are attempting to parse Rust also have to have that logic, which in my view is a downside. On the plus side, it doesn't break anything. And apparently we already do that in some other cases. And I think, as this last line alludes to, or in this particular case, we already do it, of left shift being broken into two individual tokens. And
so proc macro today cannot say it expects a less than and properly parse a left shift without special casing left shift.
right. And like sin, for example, I guess must already account for that. And
Interesting.
And I guess the idea is that we can, when we're kind of happy with where we are, we can introduce a better or an alternative Lexer API that gives you more fine-grained tokens. And I guess keep the existing one probably, which would build on the, which would probably do a like post-processing pass to lump together some of those tokens into compound tokens for older code, backwards compatibility. Yeah, that's what's being proposed. It doesn't seem to be, to me, a perfectly right choice, but
It's not like we can't make it better later.
right. I think, given that there's no perfect choice, I do err on the side of let's not. Keeping backwards compatibility seems like a good reason to me, especially given that there's precedent and that that's what the implementer wants.
Box checked.
All right. Some purpose. Const type ID feature. I don't know what this is all about. I forget.
Making the type ID function accessible to const. There was a long digression into
Right.
this that amounted to, is type ID itself as a function correct? And there was a whole side argument there of whether or not. And the key detail is that isn't affected by whether it's available in const or not.
Right. It is an interesting question in and of itself. But it would be nice to find a more robust caching at some point. Okay. Inline const expressions and patterns. Felix, you're in the call. We got Dylan in the call. Is there anything to resolve here? Or just having it?
I think Dylan signed off actually.
Oh, okay, we had Dylan in the call. All right, I don't see any like super outstanding stuff. Can't tell. Am I muted?
You're not muted.
It was the audio of me cut out briefly, but then I heard someone typing in the background. So that might have been Nico or might have been someone else. I don't know who it was. That was it was weird.
Okay. I'm getting weird things are happening on my display, but it's okay, as long as you can hear me. All right, then, let's call the end of the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you later.
Bye.